Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is lawyer Eleanore Sunchild. Sunchild, who is a member of the Thunderchild First Nation in Saskatchewan, became a member of the Saskatchewan Bar in 1999. She has presented nationally and internationally on the legacy of the Indian residential school system and the impact of colonial policy in Canada and the history and importance of the treaties. She has also presented at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues on the systemic racism in the Canadian justice system. Eleanore, thanks so much for being on the show. Kind of a big question, I guess, off the top, but how would you describe the current relationship between Indigenous peoples and the justice system?
It's strained. It's been strained since colonization, and I think that the justice system is feeling the pressure of Indigenous people. It's a system that was not built for Indigenous people, and it's not serving them well.
Many of our viewers would know your name, of course, for your representation of the family of Colten Boushie. What did that case mean to you?
I'm still representing the family of Colten Boushie. We're still assisting them, and that has been probably the defining case of my career. I met the family. I know the family. And the day after Colten was shot was when I got involved. So it's been a journey with them. It's been very hard. It's been very enlightening. And it's very rewarding.
I guess I meant for the trial and of Gerald Stanley and what that meant for you.
Honestly, the trial was very hard to watch because I've said it before, I saw the justice system crumble. A justice system that I was proud to serve. I was proud to go to court, but the trial just was so hard. There was so much injustice and mistreatment of the family during that time that I've really had to step back and look at what the justice system means and what it does for Indigenous people, and it's failing them.
What do you think that trial meant for this province, this country?
The trial was called the trial of the century, and it was because it defined race relations in our province. I had said before the trial, before Colten was even killed, that something was going to happen in this province, that race relations were to a point where there was going to be some sort of conflict. And here was a young Indigenous man who was shot by a white settler, and he was acquitted of it. That case defines this province. It does. Everybody associates Colten Boushie and the Gerald Stanley trial with Saskatchewan and the racism that's here in our province.
Do you think that's improved any in the time since that trial?
There have been pockets of improvement. For example, this province is, I'm seeing a real shift come Orange Shirt Day, September 30th. Like, people are taking note of Indigenous history, and really some of them are thinking like about the residential school system and that history. But again, for a large part of Saskatchewan who live in rural settings, it doesn't change a lot.
Like you say, you're still representing the family. A Civilian Review and Complaints Commission report found the investigation by the RCMP was insensitive and racially discriminatory to Colten's mother, Debbie. The police mishandled witnesses and mishandled evidence. Did you need that report to tell you those things?
No. No, we had brought those issues to light before the report, but I'm glad that they were verified and confirmed by the Civilian Review Complaints Commission, because that was one of the first instances, actually probably the first of this largest scale, where they found that somebody, an Indigenous person, Debbie Baptiste, was discriminated against by the RCMP that night and during the killing of Colten.
That report took 5 years. Do you know why it took that long? Should it have taken that long?
It shouldn't have taken that long at all. The police, the RCMP, sat on it for over a year. It sat on a desk, and there's no excuse for that. The family was seeking answers. They came late, and it's probably because the report itself was scathing and did verify and confirm exactly what Debbie had said all along, that she was being discriminated against.
The RCMP commissioner accepted the report and agreed to implement the recommendations. Do you know how those are coming along?
The wheels of justice are slow. The report is out there. I'm sure that it's affecting how they deal with Indigenous people to some point, but I still hear instances of racism all the time.
With that, do you think that other Indigenous people, Indigenous families are still experiencing the type of treatment that the Debbie Baptiste received?
Oh, for sure. But they're also pressing record on their cell phones. They're also becoming more vocal about discrimination and racism, and I attribute a lot of that to Debbie's courage and her bravery in voicing her story.
The Prime Minister, the family met with Prime Minister Trudeau and other government officials. They were promises made there as well. At least one of them was kept, Bill C-75. Can you tell us about that legislation?
So Bill C-75 got rid of peremptory challenges. In the Gerald Stanley trial, when they used peremptory challenges, they were, each side, defense and Crown, was allowed to challenge jurors for any reason. Just by looking at them, they could ask them to be excused. And so that's how we came with an all-white jury in the Stanley trial. Those are gone now. They can't use peremptory challenges. And I know there are critics who say that peremptory challenges were good, but to me, any kind of race-based exclusion, selection is bad. So I'm glad they're gone. And Debbie can be thanked for that.
Do you think there were, obviously, I guess, other Indigenous people, people of color, who were affected by those before that change?
Of course. Of course they were.
What do you think is needed to end the type of discrimination that we see in the justice system?
I think we need a whole new system. Honestly, this system is based in colonial law. It's based on colonial stereotypes, and it was never meant to serve Indigenous people. We need our own systems that are based on our Indigenous beliefs, our Indigenous culture, and I don't think that just appointing Indigenous people to work within the justice system, indigenizing it, is enough. I think there has to be a whole new system implemented.
Following, the horrific stabbings in James Smith Cree Nation and Weldon, a Saskatchewan farmer posted on TikTok saying, "Long live Gerald Stanley," who's very much still alive, I believe. But what did came to your mind, I guess, when you saw that people were invoking his name?
Oh, there's racism all over, and there's a lot of people in the Prairie provinces who uphold what he did as good. It's race-based stereotypes. It's racism. We always say racism kills. There's a prime example of somebody who wants to take the law into their own hands, who justifies Colten Boushie's killing, who justifies what Gerald Stanley did, and that's wrong. And I hope that they found out who that was and they charged him with a hate crime.
Eleanor, like you said, you still represent the family. Debbie's filed a lawsuit against the RCMP for the handling of the case. Can you give us any update on where things are at?
We're in proceedings in that case, but people will know when there's public issues that are going to come out on it. Yeah, so people will know.
Yeah. Eleanor, much more to talk about. We're just going to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation with Eleanor Sunchild here on Face to Face. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is lawyer Eleanore Sunchild. And Eleanore, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about when you first knew that you wanted to practice law.
It was grade 11. I was going to the Lloydminster Comprehensive High School, and I was looking at an aptitude book. I initially wanted to go to art school because I'm an artist at heart. So I was deciding what to apply for in grade 12, and I read about being a lawyer, that you had to like to read and write, and it was a profession. So I decided at that point I wanted to be a lawyer.
Were there lawyers at the time that you kind of looked up to, I guess?
No, I didn't really know any lawyers at the time at all.
I feel like, especially here in Saskatoon, I have so many friends that are actually lawyers. There seems to be a lot of Indigenous lawyers here in Saskatoon. Do you feel like there are more now, though, than 20 years ago when you were?
Yeah, there were hardly any back then. I went to the U of A, so there was Judge Tony Mandaman. He was a lawyer around that area. Donald Worm was a lawyer. Albert Angus, who's from my First Nation, was a lawyer. But there wasn't a lot of female Indigenous lawyers, and there weren't a lot of Indigenous students at the law school.
Well, how do we get more Indigenous people into law school, into practicing law?
I don't know if law is a good career, don't get me wrong, but we need Indigenous people other places as well, and not just in law school, because like I said, the system is built on colonization and colonialism. So if one of my children wanted to go to law school, I would probably encourage them, but I would probably also encourage them to look at other careers as well, because it's a good career, don't get me wrong, but it's challenging. At times it's difficult, and it's I don't know if I would probably do it again. Yes, I probably would.
Well, my next question was, what advice would you give to people looking to get into law? But and I guess maybe what are some of the challenges that those who are looking to get into law should be on the lookout for?
Well, we're all a victim of colonization. We all have a story. So if you're going to go into law or any kind of profession, like for myself, I really had to go back and do my own healing. And my own healing from being in the 60s scoop before I could really know the system and know its challenges, because some of those stories that I've heard practicing law were triggering for me. So to really represent my clients effectively, and I'm talking about Indian day school clients and Indian residential school clients, I really had to go back and focus on my own healing. So I think that, we all have a story of colonization. We've all been affected by it. And it's good if you can do your own healing first.
Good advice for sure. I was going to ask you, when you look at, bigger suits like the Indian Day School or the 60s Scoop class actions, how important is it for Indigenous lawyers to be involved in those types of cases?
For myself, I feel very honored to help people tell their story, because when they tell their story of abuse, oftentimes I'm the first person they've told. I've heard that so many times. You're the first person I've ever told, and then they tell me a very sad story of physical and sexual abuse usually. So it's an honor, but also because I am rooted in my community and know my culture and traditions and know my people, I'm able to help them at a level that I think a lot of non-Indigenous lawyers just can't, because I know my people.
Has, being a survivor of the 60s Scoop played into the type of law, the type of cases that you do?
Well, that's a good question. like I said, when I started doing residential school claims, I would get triggered by the stories of abandonment. And so it made me look at my story first. And I went to a lot of therapy and healers and like lots of deep inner child stuff to help me. And that made me a more effective lawyer. But I continue to do those stories because I understand how it is to be a child in a system, and to be able to help people tell their story and come back and direct them to some healing programs, or just be an ear or a safe space for people to heal and decolonize. It's made me a better person and a better lawyer.
Like you mentioned, there's, school was hard, not exactly telling people not to get into law, but that it's difficult. You've done some hard cases and dealing again in a colonial system. Have there been times where you've thought of giving it up?
I remember after the Gerald Stanley trial when he was acquitted, and I remember standing on the in the snow looking at the courthouse thinking, this system failed this family, failed our people. I think everybody remembers exactly where they were the moment that Gerald Stanley was acquitted. And I went outside and I looked at the courthouse and I thought, what am I doing in this system that does this, that allows this to happen? And so I did have a moment, but then I thought of my children, and I got very angry in that moment, because I was thinking, what if that was my children who went on a rural road and encountered somebody like Gerald Stanley, like that man that you talked about who was spewing hatred after what happened in James Smith. And at that moment, I thought, no, I'm going to fight this. They need to realize that what happened was wrong, and our people need representation. Our people need to be heard. So there were times where I felt like people weren't listening, the dominant society wasn't listening, wasn't getting it, especially when I was also doing Indian residential school claims. I would think, like, if people knew the gravity of these stories, if they knew what really happened in the schools, they wouldn't be so mean, and they wouldn't be so racist. Like, where's the compassion? But now I see pockets of compassion rising up in the country, like amongst settler populations, and that gives me hope. And I know that we contributed at Sunchild Law to some of that, because we've been working on those files for so long. Like, it's not just me. I have a team, and I have a team of support as well. So all those people are there with me in the trenches.
I think you're really touching on it, but what are some of those things that keep you going when you're in the trenches?
Definitely my children. Definitely the teachings of my grandfather, who was a Cree elder who talked a lot about treaty and Cree principles of love. I just look towards a future where we can feel safe once again on our lands and enjoy the benefit of treaty.
Eleanor, more to talk about here. Just need to step aside for one more quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with lawyer Eleanore Sunchild. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is lawyer Eleanore Sunchild. And Eleanor, this episode's going to air after the 30th of September, but it is coming up here. How will you be spending that day?
Every year at Sunchild Law, we have a walk from the old industrial school in Battleford to where there are a number of children buried. There's actually a gravesite there, so it's about a 20-minute walk. We've been doing that for 10 years. So this is our 10th anniversary, and it's grown in size since 2012. So that's good to see. That's how we'll be spending our September 30th.
Not a holiday here in Saskatchewan, not a holiday in Manitoba either. Is this a day that you think should be a holiday?
It should definitely be a holiday. And it should be a day that people think about what the Indian residential school meant, the history of Indian residential schools, and how the legacy of Indian residential schools still continue to affect our province today. So it should be a holiday, and people in this province, especially all the prairie provinces, need to think about the effect of colonization on their province.
What does reconciliation mean for you?
Reconciliation to me means the non-Indigenous population learning about the true history of Canada, talking to an Indian residential school survivor, because I don't think that people really understand what happened in the schools unless you hear it from a survivor. The last Indian residential school closed in 1997 here in this province. That's not long ago at all. And we have the effects of Indian residential school. We see them every day. So reconciliation to me for non-Indigenous people means learning and accepting the truth about what happened, and then going forward with that knowledge and trying to make a difference. For Indigenous people, I think it means healing. Reconciliation means healing and decolonizing, and also accepting what happened in the schools, but healing from it and moving forward. And then I think the two groups can come together and form the true treaty relationship that we should have.
Do you think we're getting close to that?
We're making some progress, but it's slow. There's a backlash in this province about treaty education, about education about Indian residential schools. A lot of people don't exactly know what it means, or they think it happened 100 years ago, or they think it meant a slap on the wrist. It's way deeper than that. There was so much physical and sexual abuse in the schools, and that needs to come to light. I think that some of it is coming to light with all of the media attention around the Catholic Church and past charges of priests being for sexual abuse and sexual crimes. So once people understand the gravity of what happened in the schools, if they ever will, that's when hopefully we can see some change.
Well, Eleanor, it was a real pleasure to be able to sit down with you and have you on the show. So big thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
That's all the time we have for Face to Face this week. Our thanks to our guest, Eleanore Sunchild. You can catch up on any episodes that you may have missed by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca. And of course, this episode and all previous episodes are also available as podcasts. You can find and download those wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us this week. We'll be back here with another episode of Face to Face next Tuesday.